A billionaire pretended to sleep, certain the girl beside him would take what she thought no one would notice. Instead, she noticed something far more important, and in doing so, taught him a lesson money never could. What would you do if you found yourself alone with a sleeping billionaire and $3,200 in cash? Take it, or do something no one would expect? Tell us in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe now so you don't miss what happens when the billionaire wakes up. This story will completely change how you think about trust. Victor Halden was not sleeping. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. His body reclined against the cushioned lounge chair of his private garden pavilion. To anyone watching, he looked like a wealthy man surrendering to afternoon drowsiness. But behind closed eyelids, Victor was fully awake. Sharp, calculating, waiting. This was a game he'd perfected over 23 years of building his real estate empire. Worth $840 million, Victor had learned life's most valuable lesson. People could not be trusted. Business partners who smiled and sued. Relatives who visited only when they needed money. Household staff who'd stolen wine, cash, jewelry. Each betrayal had hardened his heart until it resembled the granite foundations of his skyscrapers. Victor believed one brutal truth. Humans were only honest when being watched. Remove surveillance, eliminate consequences, and even decent people revealed their true nature. Greed, self-interest, opportunism. Today, he would prove it again. On the glass patio table beside him sat a manila envelope containing $3,200 in visible cash. Next to it, his $47,000 Patek Philippe watch draped across confidential acquisition documents marked private. The garden was quiet except for distant birdsong. Sunlight moved slowly across flagstone, warm and relentless. Footsteps approached. Two sets. Mr. Halden? Daniel, the head gardener. Victor didn't respond, just released a convincing snore. He's asleep, Daniel whispered. A younger voice, female. Papa, I can wait by the tool shed. No, there's severe weather coming. Just stay here in the corner. Don't touch anything. The irrigation system failed. 20,000 in rose bushes could die. If I don't fix it now, I lose my job. But if Mr. Halden wakes and finds you... I understand, Papa. 15 minutes. Please, air it. Don't touch his things. Just sit. Go, Papa. I'll be fine. Daniel's footsteps retreated rapidly. Then, silence. Victor's mind raced with assumptions. A teenage girl, gardener's daughter, modest background, alone with thousands in cash. She would look at the money. Rationalize. Take it. He waited for movement toward the table. It never came. Daniel had worked on the Halden estate for 8 months, and in all that time, he had never broken a single rule. He arrived early, left late, and kept his head down. The job paid better than anything he'd found in 2 years of searching, and he couldn't afford to lose it. But today, everything had gone wrong. The high school had closed unexpectedly, emergency maintenance after storm damage. His wife was working a double shift at the hospital. His sister, who usually watched Eric, was out of town. Daniel had no choice but to bring his daughter to work, praying desperately that no one would notice. Stay close to me, he'd whispered as they entered through the service gate. If anyone asks, you're not here. Eric had nodded silently, understanding the weight of what her presence meant. Now, standing at the entrance to Mr. Halden's private pavilion, Daniel felt his chest tighten with panic. The billionaire was asleep, actually asleep, vulnerable and unguarded, and Daniel had just received an emergency call on his radio. The South Garden irrigation system had catastrophically failed. He looked at his daughter. Eric stood perfectly still, her worn sneakers contrasting sharply with the polished flagstone, her simple t-shirt and mended jeans almost invisible against the backdrop of imported Italian furniture and silk cushions. Eric, listen carefully, Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. I have to go. Right now. Those rose bushes cost more than our rent for a year. If they die because I delayed. He couldn't finish the sentence. Eric's eyes were steady, calm. I understand, Papa. Don't move from this corner. Don't touch anything. Not the furniture, not the table, nothing. If Mr. Halden wakes up and sees you. Daniel's throat closed. 15 minutes. I'll be back in 15 minutes. He turned and ran. Inside the pavilion, Victor heard every word. He kept his breathing steady, theatrical, perfect. Now the test truly began. If your job, your family's entire livelihood, depended on your child staying invisible and silent in a billionaire's garden, would you have taken the risk Daniel did, or found another way? 5 minutes passed in absolute silence. Victor waited, muscles tense beneath his relaxed facade. He expected footsteps toward the table, the rustle of paper, the clink of his watch being lifted, anything that would confirm what he already knew about human nature. Instead, he heard something else entirely, a soft intake of breath, not greedy or calculating, concerned. Footsteps approached, but they moved toward him, not the money. Through his closed eyelids, Victor sensed a shift, a shadow falling across his face. The girl had moved closer, standing beside his chair now. Here it comes, he thought. She's checking if I'm really asleep before she steals. But Erit wasn't looking at the valuables. She was looking at his face. The afternoon sun had shifted during the past 10 minutes, moving beyond the wisteria vines that had provided shade earlier. Now direct sunlight blazed down on Victor's face and chest, harsh and unrelenting. His skin, exposed to the rays, had begun to redden. Erit noticed what the billionaire himself had missed while orchestrating his perfect test. He was burning. She hesitated, frozen between fear and instinct. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind. Don't touch anything. Don't move. Don't be seen. But she couldn't just stand there and watch someone get hurt. Moving carefully, silently, Erit reached for the large patio umbrella positioned near the pavilion's edge. She grasped the pole with both hands and slowly, inch by careful inch, repositioned it. The fabric canopy swung overhead, blocking the sun's assault. She adjusted the angle twice, ensuring the shade covered his face completely without the umbrella's shadow startling him awake. Victor felt the sudden coolness across his burning skin. His carefully constructed test scenario was unraveling. What is she doing? A breeze suddenly gusted through the pavilion, lifting the confidential documents from the table. Papers fluttered upward, beginning to scatter. Erit moved instantly, catching them mid-air with quiet efficiency. She gathered each page, checked the order, and placed the stack back on the table, positioning them exactly as they'd been, weighted down by the envelope so the wind couldn't take them again. She never glanced at the cash, never touched the watch. Victor watched through barely opened eyelids, his mind blank with shock. This was not the script. This was not greed revealing itself. Erit stepped back carefully, returning to her corner. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained calm. She sat down and waited for her father to return. She protected the man who was testing her instead of taking his money. Drop a heart emoji if you've ever chosen kindness when no one was watching. Victor sat up abruptly, his eyes snapping open with theatrical precision. Who are you? His voice cut through the silence like a blade, cold, controlled, designed to intimidate. What are you doing in my private pavilion? Erit stood immediately, her hands at her sides. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. I'm Erit, sir. Daniel's daughter. Daniel the gardener? Victor's tone hardened. Does your father know you're here? Touching my things. Yes, sir. He had an emergency. He asked me to wait here. I didn't ask if he knows you're here. Victor stood now, towering over her, using his height deliberately. I asked if he knows you've been interfering with my property, moving my umbrella, touching my documents. Erit met his gaze steadily. No tears, no excuses. The sun was burning your face, sir. I moved the umbrella to prevent harm. The wind was taking your papers. I secured them so they wouldn't be lost. Those documents are confidential, worth millions. You had no right. You're correct, sir. Her voice remained soft but clear. I had no right to touch anything. I accept full responsibility. Victor paused. He'd expected defensiveness, pleading, self-justification. Instead, she stood before him with quiet dignity, acknowledging fault without collapsing under pressure. I'll leave immediately, Erit continued. I shouldn't have been here in the first place. But I have one request. You're in no position to make requests. Please don't fire my father. This wasn't his fault. He's a good worker. You need him, and he needs this job. Whatever consequence comes from today should fall on me alone. Victor stared at her, genuinely unsettled. She wasn't defending herself. She was defending her father. She wasn't asking for mercy for her own sake, only for his. You think you can touch a billionaire's property and walk away with a polite apology? Victor pressed harder, testing. You think that's how the world works? No, sir. Eric's voice didn't waver. I think consequences exist for actions. I'm ready to accept mine. Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone that had made executives tremble in boardrooms. I asked you a question. Why did you think you had the right to touch my things? Eric didn't flinch. I didn't think I had the right, sir. Then why did you do it? She met his gaze directly, her voice quiet but unwavering. Because harm shouldn't happen when it can be prevented. Victor blinked. What? You were burning, Eric said simply. The sun had shifted. Your face was turning red. I couldn't just sit there and watch someone get hurt when I could do something about it. And the documents? Victor pressed, his voice harder now. You touched confidential business papers. Do you understand how serious that is? Yes, sir. The wind was taking them. I caught them and put them back. You could have read them. You could have. I didn't read them, Eric interrupted gently. They weren't mine to read. Victor stood abruptly, towering over her. You violated explicit instructions. Your father told you not to touch anything. I know. You could cost him his job. I know. Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't look away. If my actions cost Papa his position, that's my fault. Not his. He told me to stay still. I chose not to. Victor waited for the tears, for the pleading, for the excuses that always came when people were cornered. They never came. Eric stood perfectly still, shoulders back, accepting full responsibility without trying to minimize what she'd done. You're not going to defend yourself? Victor asked, genuinely confused. There's nothing to defend, sir. I made a choice. I'll accept the consequences. Victor stared at her, his mind racing. In 30 seconds of conversation, this teenage girl had revealed something that shattered him. She never mentioned the money, never tried to explain it away, never begged for mercy. She feared losing her dignity more than she feared losing anything else. The belief system Victor had constructed over 23 years, brick by careful brick, cemented with evidence and betrayal, fractured down the middle. For the first time in decades, Victor Halden stood frozen, completely unsure of what he knew about people, or about himself. Eric didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't make excuses. She just stood there with pure dignity, and it broke him. Victor's voice came out rougher than he intended. I wasn't asleep. Eric's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. I was never asleep, Victor continued, the words tasting like ash. The money, the watch, the documents. I left them there deliberately. I wanted to see what you would do when you thought no one was watching. The color drained from Eric's face. You were testing me? Yes. Before either could speak again, rapid footsteps sounded on the gravel path. Daniel burst into the pavilion, breathless and panicked. Mr. Halden, I'm so sorry. The irrigation took longer than. He stopped abruptly, seeing his daughter standing before the billionaire. Eric, what did you do? She did nothing wrong, Victor said quietly. Daniel's face crumpled. Sir, please. Whatever happened, it's my fault. I brought her here. I left her alone. Fire me if you must, but please don't. Stop. Victor raised his hand. Daniel, your daughter just passed a test that 47 other people failed over the past 23 years. Silence fell like a weight. I staged this, Victor said, forcing himself to meet their eyes. I pretended to sleep. I left temptations everywhere. I've done this dozens of times, always proving the same thing. That people are only honest when they're being watched. Daniel stood frozen, uncomprehending. Your daughter ignored thousands in cash, Victor continued. She protected me from sunburn. She saved documents from blowing away. She never once thought about taking what wasn't hers. Victor's throat tightened. I owe you both an apology. I tested your integrity because I've forgotten what integrity looks like. I was so certain of human greed that I couldn't recognize human decency when it was standing right in front of me. Eric remained silent, her expression unreadable. Daniel looked between the billionaire and his daughter, slowly understanding what had happened. The power dynamic in the garden pavilion had completely reversed. The man with everything had just been exposed by the girl with nothing. Victor didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't offer cash or write a check. He'd learned enough in the past hour to know that would be an insult. Instead, 3 days later, he called Daniel to his office. "Your daughter," Victor began, choosing his words carefully. "She's how old?" 17, sir. Senior year of high school. "Does she have plans for after graduation?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Community college, if we can manage it. She's bright, but we're saving what we can." Victor nodded slowly. "I'd like to offer something different. Not charity, opportunity. If Erit is interested, I can arrange mentorship. Educational support. She could learn property design, landscape architecture, urban planning. Real skills, real experience." Daniel stared. "Sir, I don't." "Think about it. Talk to her. There are no strings attached. She earned this by showing me something I'd forgotten existed." That evening, Erit stood in her small kitchen, listening to her father explain the offer. She was quiet for a long time. "Why?" she finally asked. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But I think he means it." Erit hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." The months that followed surprised everyone, Victor most of all. Erit came to the estate twice a week after school. Victor taught her to read architectural plans, to understand property values, to see potential where others saw problems. She was a careful student, thoughtful, precise, unafraid to ask questions. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. Victor found himself looking forward to their sessions. The conversations that began with blueprints expanded to books, ideas, life itself. The sharp edges of his cynicism began to soften. And the estate changed too. Erit suggested small improvements, a garden redesign here, better lighting there. Practical things that made the space feel less like a fortress and more like a home. Victor approved every suggestion. For the first time in decades, the Halden estate felt alive. For years later, Erit walked through the lobby of Halden Properties' downtown headquarters with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She was 21 now, graduating summa cum laude in urban planning and design. But more than that, she had become Victor's most trusted advisor on property rehabilitation projects. "The Riverside District," she said, spreading plans across Victor's mahogany desk. "If we preserve the original facades but modernize the interiors, we maintain the neighborhood's character while making the spaces functional. The community deserves both." Victor studied the drawings, then looked at her. "You're thinking long-term." "Always," Erit replied. "Buildings outlive us. They should serve the people who come after." Victor approved the project with a single nod. His business partners had noticed the change in him. The ruthless negotiator who once crushed competitors now asked different questions. Who benefits? What's the community impact? What legacy does this create? Some thought he'd gone soft. Others whispered about succession planning. They were half right. Late one evening, Victor stood alone in his garden pavilion, the same one where everything had changed. The umbrella still stood in the corner. The patio table remained, though the test he'd staged felt like a memory from another lifetime. He thought about that afternoon 4 years ago. The cash envelope. The documents. His certainty that the girl would reveal herself as just another opportunist. Instead, she'd revealed him. His emptiness, his brokenness, the poverty of a worldview built entirely on suspicion. Erit had given him something money couldn't buy. A reason to believe people could be better than his experience had taught him. Now, as he prepared documents in his office late at night, Victor wasn't just managing properties. He was planning a legacy, not one built on wealth accumulated, but on trust earned. And for the first time in his life, Victor Halden knew exactly who should carry that legacy forward. Victor's attorney looked up from the documents, confused. "You're certain about this?" "Completely," Victor replied. The papers spread across his desk outlined something unprecedented. Erit would become director of community development at Halden Properties, with a clear succession path to leadership. Not someday. Now. She was 22 years old. When Victor called her to his office that afternoon, Erit arrived expecting another project review. Instead, he slid the documents across his desk. She read them slowly, her eyes widening. "Victor, I can't." "You can," he said quietly. "And you will. Not because I'm giving you something, but because you've earned it. Every decision you've made, every project you've led, you've proven what I needed 23 years to learn." What's that? That trust isn't bought. It's built. One choice at a time, when no one's watching and there's no reward promised. Eric's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "You're serious." "I've never been more serious about anything." She accepted with a handshake, firm, professional, equal. That evening, Victor returned to his garden pavilion alone. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the flagstone. The umbrella still stood in its corner. The patio table remained, though no envelope of cash waited there now. He sat in the same lounge chair where he'd staged his test 4 years ago, but everything had changed. The test hadn't been about Eric's greed. It had exposed his own emptiness, the hollowness of a life built on suspicion, the poverty of a fortune earned without faith in anyone. A teenage girl with worn shoes and a mended shirt had taught him what decades of wealth never could. Victor closed his eyes, but this time, he wasn't pretending. He was resting, really resting, perhaps for the first time in decades, knowing that the legacy he'd leave behind wouldn't be measured in properties or profits. It would be measured in the person he'd learned to trust. True character, Victor had finally learned, reveals itself when no reward is guaranteed, and true wealth is recognizing character when you see it. Subscribe so you never miss stories like this, ones that remind you why integrity matters more than anything money can buy.